Let's drift back to a summer day in the early 1930s, when J.R.R. Tolkien sat at his study desk at the University of Oxford, grading examination papers, a tedious task that every professor knows too well. On one of these papers, a student had left a page blank, and Tolkien, perhaps seeking a moment's respite from the monotony, wrote on that empty page, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." He had no idea what a hobbit was, or why it lived in a hole, but the sentence had appeared in his mind fully formed, and it demanded to be explored. This single sentence, written on a blank exam paper, would grow into a story that changed children's literature forever. Tolkien began writing The Hobbit as a story for his own children, John, Michael, Christopher, and Priscilla. He would read chapters aloud to them as he wrote, and their reactions shaped the story. If they were bored, he'd add more adventure. If they laughed at something, he'd expand on that humor. The book was never intended for publication. It was simply a father entertaining his children with a tale of a comfortable hobbit who gets swept into an unexpected adventure. The story took years to write, composed in fragments during stolen moments between his academic work on Anglo-Saxon literature and his duties as a professor. The Hobbit was published on September 21, 1937, by George Allen and Unwin in London. The first printing consisted of only 1,500 copies, a modest run that the publisher hoped might break even. By December, the book had sold out completely and was being reprinted. Reviews were enthusiastic, the Times praised it, and the book won awards. What struck readers was how completely realized the world felt, how Tolkien had created not just a story but an entire mythology with its own geography, history, and even languages. This wasn't just a children's adventure, it was something deeper, richer, more carefully crafted than anything else in the genre. Bilbo Baggins, our reluctant hero, is 50 years old when the story begins, a respectable age for a hobbit, who can live well over 100 years. He lives at Bag End, one of the finest hobbit holes in Hobbiton, a comfortable home built into the hill with a round green door and brass knob in the center. Bilbo has inherited wealth and respectability from both sides of his family. The Bagginses are known for being predictable and respectable, never doing anything unexpected. But his mother was Belladonna Took, and the Tooks have a reputation for occasional adventures and irregular behavior. This Took blood, dormant in Bilbo for 50 years, is about to awaken. Gandalf the wizard arrives at Bilbo's door on an April morning, scratching a mark on the hobbit's beautiful green door. This mark is a secret sign in the runes used by wizards and dwarfs, indicating that Bilbo's home is the meeting place for an adventure. Gandalf is far more than he appears. He's one of the Astari, ancient beings sent to Middle-earth to help its people resist evil, though Bilbo doesn't know this. To Bilbo, Gandalf is simply the wandering wizard who makes excellent fireworks and occasionally disturbs respectable hobbits with talk of adventures. The mark Gandalf makes brings 13 dwarfs to Bilbo's door the next evening, eating his food and singing songs about far-off mountains. The 13 dwarfs are led by Thorin Oakenshield, whose full title is Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king under the mountain. Thorin is descended from Durin the Deathless, founder of the great dwarf kingdom of Khazad-dûm. His grandfather Thror ruled under the lonely mountain, Erebor, before the dragon Smaug descended on the kingdom 171 years before the story begins. Smaug destroyed the nearby human city of Dale, drove the dwarfs from their mountain, and claimed their gold for himself. Thorin was a young dwarf when his people became wanderers, and has carried the memory of his lost homeland every day since. Now, in his late 190s, old for a dwarf but not ancient, he plans to reclaim what was stolen. The other 12 dwarfs include Thorin's nephews Fili and Kili, who are young and golden-haired and the least dwarf-like in appearance, Berlin and Dwalin, experienced warriors who are brothers, Oin and Gloin, who are also brothers, Gloin will later become famous as the father of Gimli, though that's a story for another time. There's Bifur, Bofur, and Bomber, cousins who are distinguished by Bomber's enormous girth. He's the fattest dwarf and often needs help. Dori, Nori, and Ori round out the company, with Ori being the youngest dwarf after Fili and Kili. Each has his own personality and skills, and together they represent the last hope of Thorin's line to reclaim their ancestral home. The dwarfs need a 14th member for their company. 14 is a lucky number in dwarven culture, and more practically, they need someone small and quiet to act as a burglar. Gandalf has chosen Bilbo for this role, though Bilbo has never stolen anything in his life and has no intention of starting. The wizard sees something in Bilbo that the Hobbit doesn't see in himself: courage buried beneath respectability, resourcefulness hidden under comfort-loving habits, and that spark of Took adventurousness waiting for the right moment to ignite. When Bilbo faints after hearing about Smaug the dragon, the dwarfs are skeptical. But Gandalf insists, and the next morning, Bilbo makes a choice that will change his life forever. Bilbo runs out of Bag End without his handkerchief, without a hat, without a walking stick or money, racing to catch the dwarfs before they leave without him. This moment, choosing adventure over comfort, the unknown over the safe and predictable, is when Bilbo's true journey begins. He doesn't realize it yet, but he's stepping onto a path that will take him through dark forests and over high mountains, into the depths of goblin tunnels and the treasure hoards of dragons. He's leaving behind the Bilbo Baggins who worried about his pantry and his neighbors' opinions, and beginning the transformation into the Bilbo who will one day write his story down in a red leather book, calling it There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Holiday. The adventure has begun, and there's no turning back. The journey begins westward from the Shire, through lands Bilbo has never seen, toward the misty mountains that form a vast barrier across Middle-earth. The company travels on ponies. Bilbo's is named Myrtle, though he doesn't bond with her the way some might bond with a horse. The weather turns foul as they approach the mountains, rain soaking them thoroughly, and they are grateful when they spot a light in the distance. It leads them to 3 trolls, Bert, Tom, and William, who speak in a Cockney accent that Tolkien modelled on the working-class speech he heard in Birmingham. These trolls are not the ancient, mysterious creatures of deep mythology, but rather dim-witted criminals who bicker like petty thieves, which makes them both less terrifying and somehow more real. Bilbo's first attempt at burglary goes catastrophically wrong when he tries to pick William's pocket and the troll catches him immediately. The dwarfs come to rescue him and are captured one by one, stuffed into sacks while the trolls debate how to cook them: roasted, minced, or boiled. Tolkien uses this scene to show Bilbo's inexperience but also his quick thinking, as he manages to mimic the trolls' voices and keep them arguing until dawn. Trolls, in Tolkien's world, turn to stone in sunlight. They are creatures of darkness who cannot abide the light of day. When Gandalf imitates their voices and keeps them quarreling until the sun rises, all 3 trolls become stone statues frozen in their final arguments. And they remain that way forever. The troll's cave yields treasure, swords that were stolen from ancient tombs. Thorin claims a sword he'll name Orcrist, the Goblin Cleaver, forged in Gondolin thousands of years ago during the First Age. Gandalf takes Glamdring, the foe hammer, also from Gondolin, a sword that was borne by kings in ancient wars. For Bilbo, they find a small blade, barely more than a dagger to men or dwarfs, but a perfect short sword for a hobbit. Bilbo doesn't name his sword yet. That will come later, after he's earned the right. These weapons are legendary, forged by elven smiths in a kingdom that fell before the sun and moon were even made, and they glow blue when orcs or goblins are near, a practical warning for travelers in dangerous lands. The company stops at Rivendell, the last homely house west of the mountains, where Elrond half-elven rules. Elrond is ancient even by elven standards, over 6,000 years old, having been born in the First Age and lived through all the great events of Middle-earth's history. His house is a refuge of peace and learning, filled with song and starlight. and though the dwarfs are impatient to continue their quest, they rest there for 14 days. Elrond reads the moon letters on Thorin's map, runes that can only be seen by the light of a moon of the same phase and season as when they were written. These moon letters reveal the secret of the hidden door on the lonely mountain. It can only be found when the last light of Durin's Day falls upon the keyhole. Durin's Day is the Dwarven New Year, the first day of the last moon of autumn on the threshold of winter. The revelation that the secret door can only be found on this specific day adds urgency to the quest. If they miss Durin's Day this year, they'll have to wait another full year for the next chance. This time pressure drives the company forward, even though the path ahead leads through some of the most dangerous lands in Middle-earth. The calendar is now their enemy as much as any dragon or goblin, ticking toward a deadline that won't bend for anyone crossing the Misty Mountains. The company seeks shelter in a cave during a terrible storm. Mountain storms in Tolkien's world are not mere weather. They are caused by stone giants playing in the heights, hurling rocks at each other in the thunder and lightning. Tolkien describes the mountains themselves as alive in a sense, indifferent to the tiny creatures crawling over them. The cave the company shelters in seems safe at first, with a dry floor and protection from the wind, but it has a back door that opens from the inside, and in the night, goblins pour through, capturing the entire company except Gandalf, who escapes in a flash of light that kills several goblins. Goblins in The Hobbit are creatures of malice and cruelty, living in vast networks of tunnels beneath the mountains. They hate all other races, dwarfs especially, but also elves, men, and hobbit kind. The goblins of the Misty Mountains are ruled by the Great Goblin, an enormous creature who sits on a stone throne in his underground palace. They drag the captives before him, and he's particularly interested in Thorin's sword Orcrist, which has killed hundreds of goblins over its long history. The name Goblin Cleaver is well earned, and the Great Goblin is outraged to see it in his domain. He sentences the dwarfs to death, but before the sentence can be carried out, Gandalf reappears in a blaze of light and fire. The battle in the goblin tunnels is chaos. Gandalf's sword glamdring flashes as he cuts down goblins. The dwarfs fight desperately, and in the confusion, Bilbo is knocked unconscious and left behind in the dark. When he wakes, he's alone in the pitch-black tunnels, with no idea which way leads out. His hand, groping in the darkness, closes around something small and cold on the tunnel floor, a metal ring, lost by someone else, lying there waiting. Bilbo slips it into his pocket without thinking much about it, just a bit of found treasure in the dark. He doesn't realize yet that this small golden ring will change the course of history, that it's the most significant thing he'll find on his entire journey, more important than all the dragon's gold combined lost in the goblin tunnels. Following a passage that slopes downward toward the roots of the mountains, Bilbo comes to an underground lake, a cold, dark body of water that's never seen sunlight. On an island in the middle of this lake lives Gollum, a wretched creature with pale luminous eyes and long webbed feet. Gollum was once something like a hobbit, 500 years ago, before the ring changed him into something else, something that lives in darkness and eats raw fish and goblins that stray too close to his lake. He's curious about Bilbo, hungry perhaps, and he suggests a riddle game. If Bilbo wins, Gollum will show him the way out. If Gollum wins, Gollum gets to eat him. Bilbo, seeing no other option, agrees, and they begin trading riddles in the dark, each one a question with death as the price of silence. The riddle game unfolds in the darkness, each question a test of wit and memory. Gollum asks about fish and wind, about time and darkness, things he knows from his centuries underground. Bilbo answers correctly, though some riddles nearly stump him, and he asks his own in return about eggs and sun and mountain, drawing on his comfortable hobbit knowledge of the world above. The tension builds with each exchange, for both know what happens to the loser. Finally, desperately buying time, Bilbo asks a question that isn't meant to be a riddle at all. What have I got in my pocket? Gollum cannot answer, and by the rules of the game, Bilbo has won, though Gollum protests that it wasn't fair, that it wasn't a proper riddle at all. What Bilbo has in his pocket is, of course, the ring, the very ring that Gollum has possessed for 5 centuries, calling it my precious and relying on it for everything. Gollum realizes the ring is missing and becomes frantic, searching his island desperately, hissing and crying. The ring is Gollum's birthday present, given to him so long ago when he was still called Smeagol, when he murdered his friend Deagol to possess it. Without the ring, Gollum feels naked, vulnerable, but he also becomes dangerous in his loss. He assumes Bilbo has stolen it, which is partially true, though Bilbo found it by pure chance, and he decides that he'll eat the Hobbit anyway, promise or no promise. Rules don't matter when you've lost your precious. Bilbo, fleeing from Gollum through the dark tunnels, accidentally slips the ring onto his finger while scrambling to get away. The ring has the power to make its wearer invisible, a useful but dangerous ability that even Bilbo doesn't immediately understand. When Gollum rushes past him, unable to see him, Bilbo realizes what has happened. He follows Gollum, invisible, as the creature heads toward the exit. For Gollum knows the secret way out, the back door that the goblins use. At the exit, Gollum sits and waits, guarding the passage, but Bilbo gathers his courage and leaps over the creature in a mighty jump, landing on the other side and racing toward the light of day. This moment, when Bilbo leaps over Gollum rather than killing him, is profoundly important, though its full significance won't be understood for many years. Bilbo has his sword drawn, could easily stab Gollum from behind while invisible, and end a dangerous creature's life. But pity stays his hand. Gollum is miserable and alone, and Bilbo feels it would be unfair to kill him. This mercy, this moment of compassion when violence would be easier, will echo through history in ways Bilbo can never imagine. Tolkien later said that Bilbo's mercy was not just important, it was essential, a small moment of grace that would determine the fate of all Middle-earth. Bilbo emerges from the goblin tunnels on the eastern side of the Misty Mountains, and after wandering lost, he hears voices, the dwarfs and Gandalf, who escaped during the chaos and are debating whether to go back for the Hobbit. Bilbo approaches them, still wearing the ring and therefore invisible, and announces himself by removing it and suddenly appearing in their midst. He doesn't tell them exactly how he got the ring, just that he found it, and he doesn't mention much about Gollum. This small deception, this keeping of secrets, is unlike Bilbo. He's an honest hobbit by nature, but the ring already influences him, making him possessive and secretive about his birthday present. As he thinks of it, the company is now in the territory of the wargs, evil wolves that are larger and more intelligent than normal wolves, capable of speech and malice. Wargs often ally with goblins, serving as their mounts and hunting companions. The company is chased by a warg pack and forced to climb trees for safety, but wargs can wait, and they gather below, calling for their goblin allies to come help. Fire keeps the wargs at bay temporarily, as Gandalf throws flaming pine cones down at them, but when the goblins arrive with their own torches, planning to burn the trees and roast the dwarfs alive, the situation becomes desperate. The company seems doomed, trapped between fire below and no escape above. Rescue comes from an unexpected quarter. The eagles arrive, great birds with wingspans vast enough to carry dwarfs in their talons. The Lord of the Eagles is a noble creature who owes Gandalf a debt, for the wizard once healed him of an arrow wound. These eagles are not mere animals but sentient beings, proud and independent, with their own language and concerns. They don't involve themselves in the troubles of earthbound folk except when it suits them. But tonight they've seen the fires and the commotion, and they are curious. When Gandalf calls for help, the Lord of the Eagles remembers his debt, and the great birds swoop down, plucking the company from the burning trees just as the flames reach them. The eagles carry the company to their eyrie, a series of nests built on shelves of rock high in the mountains, far above where any enemy can reach. The eagles live here with their families, and they feed the company and let them rest for the night. In the morning, they carry them further east, to the edge of the wilderness, and set them down on a great rock called the Car Rock. This rock stands in the middle of the river Anduin, tall and isolated, and it marks the beginning of the lands controlled by Beorn, a skin changer who can take the form of a great black bear. The eagles will go no further. They've repaid their debt and more, and they leave the company to find their own way from here. Beorn lives in a wooden hall surrounded by gardens, orchards, and beehives, where he keeps enormous horses, dogs, and sheep, all animals he can speak with in their own tongues. He's a huge man, with black hair and a thick beard, immensely strong even in human form. As a bear, he's even larger and more formidable, wandering the lands at night in that shape. Bearn is suspicious of dwarfs. He doesn't trust them much, considering them greedy, but Gandalf wins him over with clever storytelling, introducing the dwarfs in pairs rather than all at once, so Bearn doesn't feel overwhelmed or threatened. Bearn hates goblins and wargs with a burning passion, for they've done him great harm in the past, and anyone who's an enemy of goblins can't be all bad in Bearn's estimation. Bearn provides the company with ponies, food, and most importantly, advice for crossing Mirkwood, the great forest that lies ahead. Mirkwood was once called Greenwood the Great, but darkness has grown there in recent years, spreading from the south where an evil presence has built a fortress called Dol Guldur. The forest is now dangerous, filled with giant spiders, dark magic, and paths that lead travelers astray. Bearn warns them to stay on the path no matter what, to not drink from the black stream, and to not leave the trail for any reason. Once they enter Mirkwood, Gandalf will leave them. He has other business in the south, and the dwarfs and Bilbo will be on their own, following a dark path through an even darker wood, with only their courage and Bearn's advice to guide them. Mirkwood stretches for hundreds of miles, a vast sea of trees so thick that sunlight barely penetrates to the forest floor. The path through it is narrow and winding, barely visible in the gloom, and the company enters with Bearn's warnings echoing in their minds. Days pass as they walk in single file, saying little, for the forest has an oppressive quality that stifles conversation. The trees press in around them, ancient and twisted, their branches forming a canopy so dense that day and night are barely distinguishable. The air is still and heavy, filled with strange sounds, whispers and creaks and distant laughter that might be water or might be something else entirely. The black stream Bearn warned about crosses their path, flowing dark and sluggish through the forest. A boat is moored on their side, but the rope across to the other bank has fallen into the water. Bombur, the fattest dwarf, falls into the stream while they are working to cross it, and when they pull him out, he falls into a deep sleep from which they cannot wake him. The water is enchanted, cursed to bring unnatural slumber to anyone who drinks or touches it. They are forced to carry Bombur on an improvised stretcher, taking turns bearing his considerable weight, which slows them down and drains their strength. Food runs short, and the gloom weighs heavier with each passing day. Lights appear in the forest one night, fires in the distance, voices singing, the smell of roasting meat. Despite Bearn's warnings never to leave the path, hunger and desperation drive the company to investigate. Each time they approach the lights, they find woodland elves feasting, but the moment the dwarfs reveal themselves, the elves vanish and the fires go out, plunging the company into utter darkness. This happens 3 times, and on the 3rd attempt, everyone becomes separated in the darkness. Bilbo finds himself completely alone in Mirkwood, unable to find the path, unable to hear his companions. With only the darkness and his growing fear for company, something strikes Bilbo from behind and he falls unconscious, wrapped in sticky threads. When he wakes, he's cocooned in spider silk, being approached by a giant spider preparing to make a meal of him. These are not ordinary spiders but creatures of evil, larger than dogs, with voices that speak in hissing, gloating words about eating juicy meat. Bilbo manages to draw his sword and kill the spider, and in that moment of triumph, his first real kill, his first true act of heroism, he decides his blade deserves a name. He calls it Sting, for the spiders will learn to fear its sting, and the act of naming the sword marks Bilbo's transformation from reluctant burglar to genuine adventurer. Bilbo uses the ring to become invisible and searches for his companions, finding them all wrapped in spider silk and hanging from trees like stored food. The spiders have captured the entire company and are arguing over which dwarf to eat first. Bilbo taunts the spiders with insulting songs, leading them away from the cocooned dwarfs, appearing and disappearing as he slips the ring on and off. The spiders call him Attercop and Tomnody, old words for spider and fool, and they are furious at this invisible enemy who stings them and vanishes. Bilbo manages to free the dwarfs, and together they fight their way clear of the spiders, though the battle is desperate and several dwarfs are wounded. Only when the spiders are defeated do they realize Thorin is missing. He disappeared before the spider attack. Unknown to the others, Thorin has been captured by the Wood Elves, the same elves whose feast fires they tried to approach. The Wood Elves are Sylvan Elves, different from the High Elves of Rivendell, more suspicious of outsiders, more concerned with their own lands than the wider world. They are ruled by the Elven King, who in later writings Tolkien would name Thranduil, father of Legolas. The Elven King lives in a palace of caves carved into the forest, with great wooden doors and stone halls lit by red torchlight, and is not friendly to dwarfs who wander through his realm without permission. The rest of the company is soon captured as well, taken to the Elven King's halls and locked in his dungeons, comfortable enough as prisons go, but still imprisonment. The Elven King questions Thorin about his quest, but Thorin, proud and stubborn, refuses to reveal why they are traveling through Mirkwood. This silence offends the king, and he has Thorin locked away separately from the others. The Elven King suspects they are after treasure in the mountain and wants a share, but without confirmation, he simply holds them, waiting for Thorin's pride to break. Days turn into weeks, and the dwarfs languish in their cells, well-fed but captive, with no apparent hope of escape. Bilbo, still wearing the ring and therefore invisible to the elves, follows the captured dwarfs into the palace and wanders freely, listening and observing. He learns the layout of the halls, discovers where each dwarf is imprisoned, and begins to formulate a plan. In the deepest part of the palace, he finds a stream that flows out through a watergate, and barrels, large empty barrels that the elves use for storing wine from the south. The barrels are floated down the stream to Lake Town when empty, to be refilled and returned. Bilbo realizes this could be their escape route, if he can somehow get the dwarfs into the barrels without being seen. The escape plan requires patience and perfect timing. Bilbo steals the keys to the cells from a guard who's fallen asleep after drinking too much wine. Wine, ironically, from the very barrels Bilbo plans to use for escape. He releases the dwarfs one by one, leading them to the storage room where empty barrels wait to be floated down the stream. The dwarfs are doubtful, the barrels are cramped, uncomfortable, and the journey will be cold and unpleasant, but it's their only chance. Bilbo packs them into the barrels, replaces the lids, and watches as elven guards roll the barrels to the watergate and drop them into the stream. The barrels float away into darkness, carried by the current, with the dwarfs inside groaning and bumping against rocks, and Bilbo clinging desperately to the outside of one barrel, having forgotten to arrange a barrel for himself in his careful planning. The journey down the river is miserable, cold water, hardwood, bruising impacts as the barrels bump together and strike stones. It takes the better part of a day to float to Lake Town, and by the time they arrive, the dwarfs are soaked, bruised, and in foul tempers. But they are free, and they are closer to the lonely mountain than they've been in over 170 years. Lake Town rises ahead, built on stilts over the long lake, with the mountain visible in the distance. Erebor, the destination of their quest, looming dark against the sky, waiting for them with its sleeping dragon and stolen gold. Lake Town, also called Esgaroth, is a city built entirely on wooden pilings driven into the bed of the long lake. Every building stands on stilts, connected by wooden bridges and walkways, with boats serving as the main method of transportation. The town exists because of trade. It stands at the junction where goods from the south and east meet those from the north, and before Smaug came, Lake Town prospered enormously from trade with the dwarf kingdom under the mountain. The master of Lake Town governs the city, elected by the townspeople, and is more interested in commerce and his own comfort than in heroism or ancient prophecies. The townspeople initially treat the barrel-riding dwarfs with suspicion, pulling these bedraggled, soaked figures from the river with questions and concern. But when Thorin announces himself, Thorin, son of Thrain, son of Thror, king under the mountain, and speaks of reclaiming Erebor, everything changes. The old songs and prophecies speak of the king under the mountain returning, of the river running with gold again, of prosperity restored to the north. The people want to believe, and some of the older residents remember stories their grandparents told of the wealth that flowed from the mountain before the dragon came. They feast the dwarfs and outfit them with new supplies, investing in the hope that the prophecy might be true. The company rests in Lake Town for 2 weeks, recovering from their journey and preparing for the final leg to the mountain. During this time, The town buzzes with excitement and speculation, though the master remains skeptical. His herd promises before, and he knows dragons are not easily defeated. Still, he can't suppress the enthusiasm of his people, who shower the dwarfs with gifts and good wishes. The master provides boats and supplies, half hoping the dwarfs succeed and half expecting never to see them again. The season is advancing toward autumn, and if they are to find the secret door on Durin's Day, they must hurry. The journey from Laketown to the Lonely Mountain takes them along the eastern shore of the lake and then inland toward the desolation of Smaig, the barren, destroyed land surrounding Erebor. Nothing grows here. The dragon's presence has poisoned the earth. The ruins of Dale lie at the mountain's southern feet, the human city that thrived before Smaig destroyed it in a single night of fire and terror. Stone buildings stand roofless and empty, streets choked with debris, a ghost town haunted only by birds and memories. The company passes through Dale quietly, feeling the weight of destruction, understanding viscerally what dragonfire can do. The lonely mountain, Erebor, stands alone, a single peak rising from the plains, visible for miles in every direction. Its slopes are steep and rocky, and somewhere in those slopes is the secret door that Thorin's map shows, the back entrance that might allow them to enter without waking Smaig at the front gate. They search for days, following the map's instructions, but finding the exact spot proves difficult. The mountainside is vast, marked by countless ravines and rock faces, and autumn is advancing rapidly. They establish a camp on a narrow ledge with a commanding view, and Bilbo and some of the dwarfs take turns watching the western slopes, looking for the door that seems to exist nowhere but on their map. Durin's Day arrives, the first day of the dwarfs' new year, when the last moon of autumn and the sun appear in the sky together. As the sun sets, its last rays strike a section of the mountain face, and there, visible only in that precise moment of light, a keyhole appears in the smooth stone, just as Elrond's moon letters predicted. Thorin produces the key that has been in his family for generations, passed from his father who received it from his father, kept safe through all their years of wandering. The key fits perfectly, and the door swings open on silent hinges, revealing a passage leading down into the mountain's heart, into darkness, into the unknown, into the dragon's lair. No one volunteers to enter, not even Thorin, for dwarfs have a healthy fear of dragons, and this is Smaig the Terrible, who destroyed their kingdom and has slept on their gold for nearly 2 centuries. But Bilbo is the burglar, hired for exactly this purpose, and so it falls to him to creep down the tunnel alone, invisible thanks to the ring, toward the glow that marks Smaig's chamber. The tunnel seems endless, sloping down and down into the mountain's roots, growing warmer as Bilbo descends, until he can see red light ahead and hear a sound like a great kettle rumbling. Smaig's breathing as the dragon sleeps on his stolen treasure. Smaig lies in a vast cavern, curled atop a bed of gold and jewels that stretches across the entire floor. Coins, cups, armor, weapons, crowns, and gems beyond counting. The accumulated wealth of the dwarf kingdom and the plundered treasures of Dale. The dragon himself is enormous, serpentine, covered in red golden scales that armor him completely. Tolkien describes Smaig as the last of the great dragons, a fire drake from the north, the greatest calamity of his age. He's centuries old, and has never been defeated in battle. But he's also vain, greedy, and prone to talking, for dragons love to boast and hear themselves speak, especially to seemingly helpless victims. Bilbo, still invisible, creeps close enough to see a golden cup sitting near the edge of the treasure pile, relatively accessible. He seizes it and flees back up the tunnel, and this theft, this single cup from a hoard containing millions of items, wakes Smaig immediately. Dragons know their hoards intimately. They can sense when a single coin is missing. Smaig erupts in fury, his roar shaking the mountain, and he bursts from the front gate breathing fire, searching for the thief who dared steal from him. He flies over Dale and toward Laketown, assuming men are responsible, but finding no one, he returns to his cavern, suspicious and alert, no longer sleeping peacefully but watching and listening, waiting for another intrusion he knows must come. Soft fade.